as many of you know, like a lot of us have, or well, we've greatly been. Oh wait, sabotage! You just raise your hand. Okay.
By accident, my bad.
Oh, it's all good. So Radio Milwaukee has been providing us a ton of content. You know, obviously they were the creators of the Save My or Say Their Names audio recording that we have been kind of pushing out as like our flagship kind of audio piece. And what you probably don't know is that they're constantly doing work around community issues. I mean, they're fully engaged with what's happening in small businesses around their communities, and very dialed into what's happening, especially Tarik with the what's happening around the election and definitely around like racial and social justice issues. So we've talked about the launch of Tarik's podcast, By Every Measure, and as we're kind of moving out of election mode and kind of moving back into encouraging people to talk about this stuff on the air and actually tackle some of this stuff with their immediate communities. I thought Tariq would be a really good resource for us to talk to, because this podcast, while it's very Milwaukee centric, has a lot of topics and themes which I feel like appear in many, many different cities. So, I mean, Tariq, that was kind of the first thing that, like, I don't know if there was a tipping point for you that it was like we need to do this. Was it the summer? Like, tell us kind of how this concept came about.
Um, excuse me. Let me sip on my tea.
Just continue hacking into the microphone. It's great. Keep doing it.
um, no. So 88.9, as of last year, previous year, we wanted to do kind of this feature podcast each year. So the first feature podcast we did was called Backspin, a search for Milwaukee's first hip hop song. Um, Actually, New York Times gave it a shout out last summer on that. And so we were talking about what should we do this year, last year, and and we had this brainstorming meeting. And I was like thinking about the fact that one, the election's coming up, a lot of people talking about systemic racism, racial wealth gap, and then the fact that Milwaukee and a lot of the Midwestern cities, when it comes to systemic racism, especially towards Black people, they rank in the last. A lot of indicators and metrics. Milwaukee's last in so many indicators. Chicago, Minneapolis. The Midwest has a lot of issues. So we decided. I brought an idea. Why don't we tackle this from kind of a racial wealth gap perspective? And that basically evolved into systemic racism. So that actually started last year. So this podcast was not reactionary to anything that was happening now.
Hmm.
I mean, it was just the timing was uncanny of when we released it. It was supposed to come out early this year, but the pandemic put a pause on that. So it was
Mm-hmm.
actually supposed to come out back in the winter,
Mm-hmm.
late spring, early spring, and then we pushed it back to the time when we released it today. So that's basically how the story it came about for the podcast. So a lot of people are like, oh, you're reacting to what's going on. I'm like, no, this is, I reinforce this is part of our why I decided to work at 88.9, give them architecture job, because it's part of our core and DNA to do these kind of projects, this kind of work. So it was just we were going to do this no matter what was going to happen. So
What? And so I loved your co-host on the podcast. How did you find your partner on this?
well, I've known him for a while. He's done events at our space. His name is Reggie Jackson. He is a research journalist, historian on race issues. He's been featured on CNN. Um, I forget that show with that comedian on CNN. He was on there. Um, but he also is the head griot of the American Black Holocaust Museum that will be opening soon in Milwaukee. It was
Hmm.
closed for a while, became virtual. Now they have a new space, and so, but he's been responsible for the like curation of that museum. But he's just an amazing research journalist. He writes a lot, contributes to the Guardian, to local paper here. Um, really knows the history of racism in Milwaukee and beyond. And he's just a great guy to know.
Can I ask you like a more nuts and bolts question? Like, how did you actually connect with him? Because I think like people, like, there's like a kind of an initial hurdle of like, okay, like how, like I know this human and they would be a really great person to talk to about this. Did you just like cold reach out?
Well, we knew him before the idea of the podcast, so he's done stuff with us prior, for years. So I always had a relationship with him. I don't remember where I met him. I mean, I've known him pretty much since I lived here. But the idea is like we needed a co-host, right? And like I brought the fact that, hey, why don't we reach out to Reggie Jackson, because he knows a lot. He tells a lot of great stories, but he backs it up with data, because that's what we wanted to use. Is like we wanted to tell stories, but more importantly, we want to show the data, because realize people just don't believe it exists. So we want to use data, and he's very good on the data. But yeah, it was just we need a co-host. It was like first name came out was Reggie Jackson, and so we just reached out to him.
And then when you guys, so was there like as far as like breaking, because that like systemic racism is a gigantic issue to tackle. So give us a little bit like of the background of like how you broke it down. Because just as like information for other people, there's 6 episodes. How did you decide where to go with each?
Yeah, as I said before, it started off like focused on racial wealth gap, and like it was like looking at racial wealth gap before we get these episodes. Like it seems like racial wealth gap kind of affects every other system. So that was initial thought. And then we came back and looked at basic data. I was just doing a lot of research and data, and it was like the systems kind of presented ourselves to them as episodes. So basically we developed a 6-part episode based off different systems. So it's education, and all the systems are dealt with kind of the metrics in Milwaukee, which were like some of the worst in the country. So all the systems we presented had kind of a related to Milwaukee's issues, as far as this ranking. So it was like we did education, criminal police, criminal justice policing, housing, wealth gap, education, and I think it was it. And then we wanted to do an episode. We didn't want to kick off with one of the systems. We want to do an episode of what is systemic racism, which was very key, because I was coming and learning, just looking at my feed and talking to people that they had no idea what systemic racism is. And you hear people in leadership roles saying it doesn't exist. And so we wanted to explain what it is and show that systemic racism is different than your run-of-the-mill racism. And wanted to show exactly that is. So set up the podcast as, here's what systemic racism, understand this as kind of a guide before we get deeper.
And so like, I mean, that I like that setup, because like it's that concept is kind of evergreen for everybody, like that's something that you kind of need to know going into like whatever life, for one, but also the podcast. You're speaking to like the Milwaukee issues, but did you guys kind of think about and conceptualize the rest of the episodes with bits like that are evergreen and like going to apply to folks outside?
I mean, it was a Milwaukee centric, but there's a lot of stuff, data and stories we talked about nationally, like personal stories. Like Reggie, my co-host, and we're both transplants from the South. Like Reggie's originally from Mississippi. I'm from most of the Southeast, mostly Atlanta. So we brought in a lot of, there was a lot of information about Milwaukee, but most of the data really applied to any other major city in this country, especially most of the Midwest cities, and even Northeast cities. So yeah, it was a focus in Milwaukee, mentioned stories in Milwaukee, brought in guests from Milwaukee to talk about kind of what they're doing in community to dismantle these systems, but it really could apply anywhere. Right.
And like when somebody's putting together content like this, how important is it for them to be thinking about something that's like content that's like that's going to be evergreen, whether it's something that applies to people nationally or like just something that's going to not time out, essentially? Like, is that a consideration of yours when you're like putting something together like this?
Well, yeah, I guess you think these projects, these particular podcasts is intent to be long living, not time since. So all these projects we do, that's with the intent to make sure that what we cover, that it can be applied, next year or 5 years down the line. It doesn't matter. So that was just that's the intent of these feature podcasts, whether it's a Backspin podcast or this podcast.
Right.
So it was meant to be something that we can share 2 years down the line, 3 years down the line. So that was the purpose.
I wonder, like, so just like I'm not going to get into the detail of the actual episodes because it's pretty dense. It's really, really, it's fascinating, but also like, I'm curious too, like the bend of the content you guys are doing, you're constantly doing. Like, how has that always been a staple of the station, or how did that kind of become part of the fabric of Radio Milwaukee's editorial programming? Were you, I mean, you've been there for a while, so I would imagine you've seen some kind of evolution take place.
Yeah, we've been there. I've been there since the early days before we even launched. But yeah, again, it's part of the core. We started off doing stories on air. We call them pop stories. So these little positive stories between the songs in the station. When the beginning, the stories were a lot longer. They were like 4 to 6 minutes of stories, and then they evolved into shorter pieces. And then I pushed for more web editorial content to drive people to the website to learn, get more in-depth knowledge of the stories and more about Milwaukee. So it's always been part of DNA. We were never set up as a traditional radio station. I mean, we're not even. I mean, technically we are a triple A station, but we're not really triple A. If that makes sense. And all of our staff has no. We were never radio people. Like we're this hodgepodge of weirdos and nerds and geeks who love music, who love Milwaukee, that became radio. Like Jordan Lee, our program director, didn't go to school for radio, wasn't a radio personality. He was a hip hop DJ. I was an architect. I think Nate's our editorial person was the closest to anything that had any radio experience. But most of us is just, and I think that contributed to what we do and what we care about and how we, tackle issues and how we tackle content. We look at a different space that we're more than just a station that plays music.
When you started doing the pop stories, which I love that kind of like idea, like in my brain that feels like a really manageable thing for anybody to create, like a 4 to 6 minute piece about your community that like you can insert as like something that into your clocks at the end of the hour or whatever when you're like switching over programming. Was there any of those stories which kind of like really responded, which made you guys realize that like, oh, this is like, this is working, people are engaging with this? Or were you guys just like, we like this, so we're gonna follow this vibe?
I think it was just, we're doing this, right? No matter what people like, this is part of the core, right? But we did get a lot of comments. We did a story about a woman who was in the Holocaust, lived in Milwaukee, and we got so much feedback, so much traffic, and people crying, emailing, crying, telling us they were crying to the story. And people like email and say, "What was that story again? I want to volunteer at this organization." So we start seeing the impact, anecdotal impact of what we were doing, because people want to get involved with an organization or learn more about a person doing something for the community, and just seeing the shares on social media, on Twitter and stuff. And I think people were getting tired of local news where it was just like, if it bleeds, it leads kind of concept, in Milwaukee, especially when we cover Black and brown Milwaukee, which is never really highlighted positively in the local media. I think that really reached people in a different way, attracted people. We hear people when they donated us, we ask them why they donated, and a lot of times they say because of their stories, and then the music.
Yeah, it's interesting when you're talking about this. I invited a friend, I think a friend of mine who may or may not be on the call, an organizer who I was kind of just talking to him and letting him know, like, yeah, we're kind of getting, putting ideas together to, really focus on content and community. And one of the things that he mentioned that was most important is reconnecting with the community's elders, the stories, the actual stories of the communities, of people who've lived in the community for a really long time, people who understand what the cities are, what the towns are, like what they meant. And like when you say that, that just made me think like, oh my God, that's like exactly. And like you said, it's not a flashy headline, but it's a story that people can love and like kind of and identify with and like really connect with. get like, are there any other things that you guys are thinking about, like when you're creating content that like would be maybe like a helpful kind of like tidbit for people if they're thinking about, I know, because you especially, Tarik, you're doing stuff in the food world. You're like, what's the kind of like, what's front of mind for you when you're thinking about putting a story together or putting a series together?
So one, we do. I don't know how many music station has it. Well, like every music station has a music meeting, but we have an editorial meeting like a newspaper. So every Monday, except during our membership drive, yay, donate now. Um, we have a pitch meeting, editorial meeting where we sit down and talk about upcoming weeks and future weeks of content ideas, pitch stories. So that's always been part of our station. So that's where a lot of the ideas come for our stories. As far as me, I look at it in the vein of our mission. Our mission is to be a town hall for Milwaukee, to connect and engage with Milwaukee in different ways on different issues, positive um, um, stories, or even issues that people care about. So that we use that as a lens. We use our mission of the station as a lens for content, to engage, to create conversations, to show other stories that people don't pay attention to.
Cool. Well, I definitely want to talk a little bit about the Eau Claire voting initiative that you guys have been working with Bon Iver on. Maybe we can give that a little shout out, and also like, but like maybe we take some questions actually just before things get
I
too.
just also want to say that
Mhm.
we're thinking about talking about doing a season 2.
Oh, cool.
And also we are working on a partnership with the Brookings Institution for some events as well for this podcast, because one of the guests is Andre Perrier, who's of the Brookings Institute, wrote the book. I can't think of it now, top of my head, but yeah. So that's working, and then there's a spin-off podcast that I'm launching called Diverse Disruptors, where we talk to diverse Black and Brown LGBT tech founders, innovators, entrepreneurs, kind of like in the vein of How I Built This, but all focus on um, um, people of color and women.
I love that. That's perfect for you and your like your techie brainery over there, I feel like.
Mm-hmm.
Does anybody else have any questions? I saw Christine was asking if you guys ever source stories from your audience.
For me?
Yep.
Oh, sometimes. Yeah, we have an email on our website, submit a story. So we get emails of different stories. Some are good, some are trying to promote their concert. But there's some interesting stories we get. So yeah, we do. Sometimes we do stories that people pitch us.
Yeah. Do you have any helpful tips for people who are maybe looking to like, I don't know, go out into the community and find stories, find people to engage with? Like, how are you finding the people, even just when you're talking about the businesses and the tech folks? How are you?
I think we have the luxury of having a staff that's personally engaged with the city, right? So Maddie, who is the one coordinating the Brookings Institution collaboration, runs our events, she's well connected. So she brings her connections into the station or pitches. So she's part of the pitch meeting. So a lot of our staff is not just working their 9 to 5, go back home. They're engaged with the community. So if I don't know somebody, I guarantee somebody on our staff knows somebody that's we want to do a story about content wise. So we're very fortunate to have a staff that's truly engaged with our mission and engaged with the city. That makes it a little bit easier for us to not, scour the earth trying to find somebody. It's like pitch story. Hey, we want to do this. Oh yeah, I know this person. Here's their email. That's our station.
Right.
And we're really lucky to have that. And I'm like, as far as advice, that's the advice I give. It's like, if you care about your city, you just get engaged with your city, and that goes a long way. And have your staff as well. If your staff is like all about the city or where they live, that should make it easier to find stories.
Yeah, and I think this kind of ties back to a lot of the stuff we were talking about initially when we're like, the people that can tell the story best are the people who are living it and in the middle of it, and like seeking out those people and those voices and like really doing whatever folks can to like amplify them and highlight them. Like that is such a different experience for both them and yourself than trying to just talk about it out from the outside in, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I got a question too, yo. I got to jump in on this joint.
Do it.
You know what I mean? You always be killing it too, man. I really dig your passion, bro. It speaks volumes. You can hear it in the back of your words, bro. But I do want to know, yo, already, what is some tips that you could give for people in regards to the storytelling? I noticed that you said that the longer piece used to be like 4 to 6 minutes, which means that you're doing some really concise editing. And I was wondering, when your experience is what makes something a concise, meaningful story that fulfills the obligation of staying true to the narrative, but also informing the audience.
Well, basically, I'm not the best person to answer that. Or Nate, who's head of our editorial, who does an amazing job. He's the one that did all the editing for a podcast. He does all the editing for the on-air stories. But basically, it's supposed to get everything. Everything is it's basic journalism 101, right? It's kind of like who, what, when, where, why, in like a 2-minute piece, and then drive them for an extended version to the website at the end on air. So that's basically it. You narrate, get all the important parts. If there's some emotional thing that's really that tugs at the heart or tugs at the emotions, make sure that's in there, and get the most critical part, and then add. If you want to hear more, go to the website because we write it out, so it's like a whole story on the website as well for more information.
Word, okay, yeah, I can dig it. Appreciate that, Play.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody else have anything they want to put out there to Tarik? Okay, Tarik, give us a lowdown on the Eau Claire thing then.
Yeah, my new buddy Justin Vernon. No, just kidding.
Your new BFF.
So the Eau Claire thing and Justin Vernon. So the basic quick story. I was approached. I used to live in Minneapolis. So I was heavily involved in the music scene. My show used to be in the Current. And so I knew a lot of people that became kind of cahoots with Justin Vernon later on in years. And I got an email from Ryan Olson, who worked for Polisa and all these people, saying, "Hey, I want to talk to you about this campaign that Justin Vernon wants to do." And that was like months ago. And basically we got over phone calls. It became different things, from a voting telethon to different things, and it just was a long process. But basically the project is basically to engage Wisconsin, which has become a very, to put it lightly, divisive state. Like the city and suburbs are basically like hate each other, and the rural or urban hate each other. So they wanted to talk about voting, important voting, but actually go beyond voting, and have conversations with people in the community around the states about issues that are important to them, and why voting is important for that, and why we need to be more engaged, and just trying to understand each other. So that was kind of the campaign. So we started having conversations. I became the host of these conversations, but then there was the other music portion where Justin Vernon would like have a contest. We will have a contest, which we hosted, where if you or your friend is not going to vote or not registered, sign up for this contest, and Justin Vernon will have a conversation with you and just talk about why you're not voting and all that stuff. Then perform a song for you, like a new song. And they were doing that in different cities in Wisconsin. So that's basically the campaign. We've had bucks with videos, local musicians perform. I interviewed a head of the Wisconsin Farmers Labor Union. That's in La Crosse, not La Crosse, Chippewa Falls. I interviewed two restaurant owners and a host of a PBS show, Wisconsin Foodie, about the restaurant industry, the restaurant bill. So we're trying to, because part of me is like, we say vote, and a lot of people's like, in the Black community in Milwaukee, which basically, didn't go to polls because like they look at their roads, they look at their neighborhoods, like I voted, I did this, and nothing's changed. So we wanted to have those conversations, because I guess sometimes you get to this point of voting, just like you go to like it was said earlier, like I go to ballot, who's all these people in my ballot? I don't know. What am I doing? Who's a comptroller? What's a comptroller? And so my intent was to go beyond that and really talk about what people care about, and understand why, and really see that, for example, the urban and rural areas are no different. They have issues. They have a digital divide issue. They have a lot of issues, and a lot of people don't know a lot about the rural areas, and the same vice versa. So those type of conversations are really, because if we can't get to a point where it gets better if we don't actually have real conversations, not on social media, because those are not
Yeah.
conversations. Like one interview, I don't know when it's coming out. We interviewed the former health commissioner of Milwaukee, who was the first city to call racism a public health crisis. Milwaukee was, and she was behind that. So we interviewed her. She left. She quit her job because of racism and sexism, of attacks, and now she's going to DC. So we interviewed her. I interviewed Justin Vernon just about why he does this and what do you expect to happen? Like, what's going to be, are we going to do? Is it just the election and we go back to our normal selves? So it's really trying to break the kind of the wall of social media and really have conversations, and hopefully people see that, hey, I live in Milwaukee, I talked to some guy in Chippewa Falls, and hey, we care about the same issues,
Yeah.
So that's the whole point.
The videos are really, I'll make sure to link them in the notes. They're really great. They're like, again, like 4 to 6 minutes, and just kind of like, Tarik having conversations with these people that you're like, wow, like I didn't know these things about, but it's really cool. And I thought it was like a really great example of kind of stepping out of, it's definitely stepping out of music, but not like, I found it to be very, it's relational, like you can identify with all these people and the issues that you're having, because by some extension, they're things which apply to you or affect you. And I think it was a really cool idea, and it could be something that any station takes and puts their own twist on. It doesn't have to be about the election. It could be locally driven. It could be about, some specific issue that folks are having within their market. And I think, we're definitely worth kind of checking it out and just seeing the way that the interviews are structured, and like, they look good. It doesn't look like it's like high production. It looks like it was like, like anybody could, like, not anybody, but you could do it. You don't have to have like a crazy studio setup to make it happen. So yeah, keep an eyeball on that, and I'll make sure to link to it as well on Friday when I send out notes and stuff. So cool. Well, thank you so much, Tarik, for everything. And you guys, like, thanks for dialing in, and like, let's keep talking about how to inspire folks to do, whether it's little pop stories, whether it's podcast, but just the things and the tools that we can put out there to people to inspire them to have these conversations with their communities, and the things that we can do to just remind folks, like, there are storytellers in all of these places. There are, and like that relationship with their community, with those people, with music, with this, whatever. It's all stuff that you can build. It's all right out there. It's really just about connecting with those folks. So I'll check back in Friday with maybe Thursday actually, with our post for this week. Make sure you're telling people about socials. Make sure you're telling people, and I'll send through also the verbiage, and we'll come up with a plan for, to like actually reach out to stations in a more formal way. And again, if anybody has extra bandwidth or time to reach out and help us do some of the recon on affiliates, that would be amazing. We need help. What else? Any other questions before we dip, y'all?
I do have one request. If you listen to it, if you like it, please share with your networks. So
we put it up on the FairPlay socials. Feel free to share our post. And
also,
cool.
one other thing, sorry, this isn't unrelated, but I thought it was worth bringing up for the call. I'm not sure if anyone saw the Polaris Prize winner last night in Canada was Backwash, a Black trans musician. So shout out to Canada.
Wow.
Picked with like a bunch of radio DJs I'm sure we all talked to from Canada. And that record is crazy. So everyone go check out Backwash.
Trev, can you send me a link to it and I'll pop it in the notes?
I sure can.
Okay.
Thanks that's for mad everything. Weird. I just
What?
got a text from somebody, and I was thinking about that. That's mad weird that he brought that up. But yeah, that joint is like some whole evil, like satanic / not satanic heavy stuff. It's real raw. I checked, guys. I saw the Polaris trend. I was like, that's interesting. That joint is real heavy, real heavy.
It's a lot of heavy metal samples.
Yeah. It's interesting though. It is definitely interesting. It was not what I was expecting to be something that would want anything. So that was really cool that it actually
not from Polaris, that's for sure.
Yeah. Hey man, 360 degrees on the square as well as a circle.
Do it.
All right, y'all. See you back here. Same bat time, same bat channel next week.
Thank you.
Bye.
Y'all.
Bye.
Go vote early.
Yoli. See you later, Sabotage. Love seeing your smiling face. Hi, man.
Hi.
Hi, James.
I was like, maybe we should just catch up for a sec. Hi, Amy.
Hi, Amy. Yeah. How are you?
I had to jump on. You're so impressive. Seriously, this thing together fucking blows my mind. I'm sorry I'm not on it more often.
Don't be.
Get on doing his thing. So I try and pop on and in when I can. And
that's all we can ask for, dude.
Really,
that's
really
perfect.
Inspiring. What I sent to you,
Uh-huh.
check out when you get a minute.
Okay.
Hannah, you too. Hi, sweetie. It's so good to see your face.
You too.
Is this amazing organization called My Block, My Hood, My oh my God. My Block, My Hood. What did I say? My Block, My Hood, My Party? Am I like, it's not my party.
I saved the chat, so I'll definitely pull it up.
It's Jamal Cole, and I actually he came to my awareness because Nathaniel Rateliff is, of all the artists that I work with, all of them, I'd say him and John Baptiste are the most like forward and really, really engaging. But Nathaniel in particular, you know, just an amazing human. And when he was out on tour, he was really reaching out to like inner city community organizations that were doing community building. And Jamal came to him. And I mean, this guy's gotten a shit ton of press, you know,
cool.
I think like Obama's foundation has gotten behind him, and you know, like how Walmart does like this, like they send thinkers down there and do some stuff. And that's where Nathaniel met him. Oddly enough, that Walmart would do anything that's progressive, but they were. Anyhow, it's an incredible organization that I think really does a lot of what you're saying and what Tarik was saying, which is like start in your own community, you know?
Cool.
I feel like we're going to go heal the world with like these huge things. And we just forget. I mean, I'm sort of surprised. There's one other person with a Biden-Harris sign out in front of their house. That's it.
I know.
Like where are all the signs? Even if Illinois is going blue, like why are people afraid to put out who they believe in?
Because people are spazzing right now. Like
I go to Wisconsin way too much because my daughter's in college up there, and the Trump signs are fucking terrifying.
I know.
I'm going to leave you with. And I'll let you two ladies chat.
Okay. Good seeing you, Amy. Thanks for popping on.
Oh my God. Thank you for doing all of this.
Yeah.
Really,
tell a friend, and any of your folks that you talk to, like we don't expect people to be on every week. Anybody who you think wants to just dip in or even just follow along on the notes is totally fine.
Would you mind if the interns at MIC jumped on?
No.
They are, you know, they've really, really, which is a whole nother story, and I can talk about it later, but Eric just launched, Hannah, I don't know if you saw, he and 5 other artists just launched their agency today, Arrival Artists.
Congrats, I saw.
Thank you. And Jess, it's my husband, it's Ethan Berlin, Carl Morris, Ali Hedrick, and John Bongiorno. Cosign probably has worked a third of these artists.
Cool.
Nila Frianya to Krungbin to just a ton of them. But they literally went to 3 different organizations and have been working with 3 different organizations to find people of color to come to work at the agency. And it is beyond challenging for them.
I know.
You know, and I don't know that any of these agencies really, I'm just letting it's been an extraordinarily difficult journey. They're trying to be astutely aware that they have nobody of color right now. And they don't even know where to go look. Like they've got people looking for them and they can't seem to find it.
Crazy. Well, yeah, totally.
whole nother thing, but
Oh.
anyhow.
All right.
Bye, you guys.
So,
Talk to you later.
Bye.
bye.
Hi.
Bye.
Thanks for reading my thing. Totally
Yeah.
appreciate the notes.
Yeah, it just needs one oomphy sentence. Like
I know.
one big splashy, because it's so good.
I know I tried to make the first sentence oomphy, but I wonder if it's like, it's just, I think it's more procedural, you know?
Yeah, there's something, and what we know, but this doesn't say outright, is that it is not just like amplifying, like it's not just moving power